Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for attending this monthly meeting of the Bastiat Society. For those of you who I have not met, my name is Ben Rast. I'm the president. The Bastiat Society started in Charleston in 2004. It was co-founded by Walter LaCroix, our chairman, and Dory LaCroix, our treasurer.
I resigned.
You resigned. We're looking for a treasurer. The Bastiat Society was started as a way of putting out a very simple message that we thought was not being heard often enough. That is, the world is getting better. It's not getting worse. And the reason it's getting better is because there are people who are principled wealth creators, creating wealth in peaceful, voluntary transactions, and a wealthier world under those conditions is a better world. So we think business, peaceful, voluntary, and honest business makes the world a better place. We consider that the moral high ground. It's the moral high ground that has been abdicated by many business people who seem to apologize for the success. We think success that is honest and that is peaceful and voluntary is nothing to apologize for. It's a moral virtue and a material virtue, but also a moral virtue. So again, thank you for coming. If this is your first time, we meet monthly, usually on the first Wednesday. Our agenda tonight will be Peter Calcano from the College of Charleston will introduce our speaker. We'll have our program. At the end of the program, we'll have a couple of quick housekeeping notes, feature our upcoming schedule, mention our website, talk about how the meeting is paid for, and then we'll adjourn promptly at, the goal is to be out of here no later than 7:10 or so. So again, thank you for coming. I hope you enjoy it. And Peter, I'd like to introduce you to introduce our speaker.
No introduction.
Peter needs no introduction.
Thank you, Ben. Brad asked me if I would do this the other day, and so I finally replied today. And Doug called me as soon as he found out that I was doing this and said, "You will keep it short, right?" He's like, they've read my bio. They don't need to go on. I don't like long introductions. And I told him, yes, I would keep it merely to a page. Right? But most of you know Doug Walker. He's been associate professor at the College of Charleston now for several years. And if you saw in his bio, Doug received his undergraduate degree at the University of Kansas in 1993 in accounting. And when he realized he didn't want to be a number cruncher, right, you had no skill set for that, so to speak, he decided to pursue economics. And so I first met Doug in 1993 when he came to Auburn to pursue his PhD in economics. And I'm not sure how many of you know, but we actually shared an office in graduate school for the first 2 years that he was there. And I didn't see him a lot in the office, but one of the things was that there was a quote above his desk that I went over and looked at one day, and it says, quote, "Once something has been approved by the government, it is no longer immoral." Reverend Lovejoy. For those of you who know who Reverend Lovejoy is, that's the Reverend on The Simpsons, right? And Doug is a big fan of The Simpsons. In fact, he just recently contributed to a book called Homer Economicus, right? The Economics of The Simpsons, which he wrote a chapter on Mr. Burns' Casino, in which that quote is actually relevant. Now, when I did see him in the office, though, I remember him reading books about how to play craps and planning trips to Las Vegas. I thought he was a slacker. What I didn't realize is that this was actual preparation for a very active research agenda. And in 2006, we were lucky enough to have, we announced an opening here at the College of Charleston, and Doug contacted me, and I encouraged him to apply. And he started it, obviously, in the fall of 2007, and we were very fortunate to have him. Again, what many of you do not know is that he actually had another offer at that same time, the University of Alberta in Canada, and they actually pretty much designed that position for him. Fortunately for us, warm weather and good restaurants won out over cold weather and government money. Okay? So, now, as you know, Dr. Walker's research is focused on gambling, and he came out with his book in 2007, The Economics of Gambling. In addition, he's published dozens of journals, articles. One of his most recent publications being in Public Choice, an article that he co-authored with me, which he recently confessed he considered to be one of his best pieces. Now he is considered, on top of just being a scholar here and an expert in the U.S., he's actually very much considered to be an international expert on casinos. He's been invited to Canada, the Netherlands, Macau, China, all been invited to give presentations on his work. Most recently, though, he talked to me about one of his greatest accomplishments of his life, right? Which was completing the 100 beer club at Mellow Mushroom. A feat that I do hope to one day achieve, right? Okay. So, again, I could bore you with all that other stuff about his area, and you can get that from his bio, but with that, let me just say, with the passage of the gambling votes in North Charleston, I think there's going to be a lot of demand for his area of expertise. With that, we're going to let Dr. Walker address whether or not legalized gambling is good for the economy.
Much nicer introduction than I was expecting. I don't see how you can remember a lot of that stuff from grad school. None of it is untrue. I do have some, in case you're interested, I have a few recent articles that relate to the North Charleston passage. Three of them are kind of just looking at what they've done to make it pave the way for casino boats to be able to dock in North Charleston. They still have to go out into international waters for gambling to take place. And then the first article is a recent story about the Southern Baptists recently coming out against all forms of gambling and homosexuality. So if you haven't heard about that, feel free to take one of these. Okay, so if you paid attention to Ben's introduction, and first of all, thank you all for coming. The weather's terrible, so I do appreciate you coming to listen. And hopefully this won't be as bad as like a college lecture in terms of boringness and economics and all that. I'll do my best. But it is an interesting topic, at least. But if you listen to Ben's introduction, the question we're asking here is legalized gambling good for the economy? Well, the short answer should be, well, who cares? It's a free, voluntary transaction between individuals. So the short answer is that should be a secondary issue. But we'll actually address what are the economic effects. Okay, so I'm going to give you just kind of a real quick overview of what type of gambling is legal in the U.S. and in South Carolina, and then we'll go into the economic impacts of it. So among economists, I have a few things on what economists think of this. In a recent paper that asked AEA, that's American Economic Association members, do you agree with the statement, a casino typically generates more benefits to society than costs? Over half of professional economists, and this is the biggest professional organization we have, so these are mostly pretty respectable people. I'm not a member. But more than half say no. 17% agree or strongly agree, and 30% were neutral. So even among economists, it's not a clear, there's not a clear answer to this. It is an issue that hasn't been studied a lot in the economics literature, but this is just a random question where they gave these people a survey and asked, what do you think of casinos? So most people think they don't know, or it's slightly negative. Paul Samuelson, who is probably, if not the most famous, one of the most famous and important economists of the last century, very influential. He had this comment in one of his principles textbook, and this is quoted very frequently in the literature on gambling, where he argues that a good case can be made against gambling, that it's just a transfer of money. We're exchanging money, there's a casino there, and it just takes people's money and they get nothing in return. Which seems very odd for such a good, and he's a bright guy for sure, economist, to say that this is just a transfer of money. Why is this any different than me paying money to go to a movie or paying money to join a club or anything else? So, but he does put this caveat in there that if it's, so he does kind of acknowledge that there is some recreation value. But for people that spend a lot of time killing time, or professional gamblers, other people have argued, then it subtracts from national income. which is really kind of silly, but you kind of have to overlook this because it is a principles text. I mean, I subtract from national income by sleeping and going on vacation occasionally, not working 24/7, if you can even consider what I do to produce. So there is really a lot of, I was very surprised when I started looking at this, why, first of all, economists hadn't addressed gambling much, and since they have, there seems to be a lot of wrong stuff on it. So if you're a libertarian, again, as I kind of mentioned before, whether it's good for the economy maybe should be a secondary question. More importantly is, should people have the right to do what they want to with their money? Spend it on, I bought some lottery tickets last night. I knew it was a pretty stupid thing to do, but it was, I had $22, so I went and bought some tickets. It didn't, hurt me that much. Do you want to prevent people from doing things that maybe you think are a bad decision for them? But from an individual freedom perspective, clearly, why should anyone want to prevent either casinos being built or people being able to gamble? You have a lot of pro-business people oppose the introduction of casinos, and if you kind of classify politicians as pro-business, most people would think of Republicans maybe being more pro-business, but those tend to be the individuals who are more often opposed to legalized gambling, whereas Democrats or social liberal people are often more pro-gambling. And of course, the Southern Baptists are against gambling.
And homosexual.
Yeah, that's right. That's another talk for another time. Anyway, so the short answer is, and I don't know, to actually give a good answer to this, you'd have to do a lot more research than has been done, or than I've done, or anyone's done. But I suspect that it does more good than harm. And part of that is that I put a lot of weight on allowing individuals to do what they want with their own money, because when they exchange money for lottery tickets or groceries or whatever, we know that they must be expecting to get more benefits from what they're buying than from the money they're giving up, right? They're getting value in excess of the money they're paying. So for that reason, it's no different whether economic transactions are taking place by the purchase of cars or tangible goods or services such as gambling or education or anything like that. So I think the bottom line would be it's probably a good thing if your key concern is the economy or economic growth, and why not allow casinos? Okay, so that's the kind of the short answer. Now here's a little bit of overview of how this industry has developed. So last year there were, and some open, some closed, but over 400 commercial casinos. That means not tribal casino, but other casinos. And they were legal in 13 states, and in addition to those, there were over 450 tribal casinos, and those take place in 29 states. So there's some type of legal gambling pretty much everywhere in the country. I think Utah may be the only exception still, but I don't follow them that closely. Revenues last year were over $30 billion for commercial casinos, with $5.6 billion paid in taxes to state governments. And what it ends up being is not an argument when we talk about gambling and should we allow it or not. It ends up not being about should individuals be allowed to spend their money how they want. It ends up being how can government raise revenue. And so that's what the policy issue ends up being. But in any case, it does contribute a lot to state governments. Tribal casinos earn a lot too, and I don't have very recent data on that, at least $26 billion. And they don't have to report those, so we don't have good numbers on that. But that's a big business too. And because they're sovereign nations, they don't have to do all the reporting that